I know that USC fans really want to make this the Alex Grinch hour. I'm up for it. I mean, like, I didn't want this to be the Alex Grinch hour, but it pretty much needs to be, right? We have a lot to unpack. So here's the thing. We could give the USC staff the benefit of the doubt and say, you know what? Like, there's this long runway. Like, we've talked about this a lot. There's the long runway towards South Bend on the 14th. That's when this defense really has to be ready. Just in all candor, the USC defense does not need to play a high level of football for USC to be 6-0. Like, this offense can pretty much pick its number in these first 6 games, score 50 or more points, and the defense could play below average as it did against San Jose State, and it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter against Arizona State. It's not going to matter against Colorado. Probably not going to matter against Arizona, though Jaden DeLora, maybe that game could get a little slippery. Plus, you have the look-ahead factor to Notre Dame in that game on October 7th. But generally, the defense is not going to be elite to win any of these first 6 games. And so we talked about that long runway. So the coaching staff has some time to get everything organized on defense. And we did say, and this is where the coaching staff did really well, play lots of guys, send the true freshmen into the fire, get lots of evaluations on film so that you can teach guys more fully. You can't teach them from the sidelines. You need to put them on the field. And so you need to allow for imperfections. You need to allow for failures. You need to allow for all sorts of stumbles and wayward moments, which we had. And in game 1, like, this is why you schedule a cupcake in game 1, to be able to play more people. Yeah, it's not that impressive, but you. And I'm going to move rooms since I'm having some issues here. All right. Now, hopefully, this will be a lot better. Okay. So I'm having my own Alex Grinch moment here. All right. So, playing lots of guys, that makes sense. And that's something the coaching staff did really well, I thought. You had the wide receivers, like 10 receivers played at least 16 snaps, and you had lots of really balanced snap counts. You had all sorts of offensive line rotations as well. But the main focus is on the defensive side of the ball. And so, as much as the concept of, hey, we have a lot of time to figure this out, as much as that concept always did make sense, there are 2 main things wrong with what Alex Grinch and, of course, Lincoln Riley, as the guy who has stood by Alex Grinch, chose to do. And so the first part is the complicated scheme, right? And this was dissected on film. You saw the football analysts talking about that 3rd and 22, an exotic blitz scheme instead of just having 7-8 guys back, just trying to be complicated, trying to be creative. And on 3rd and 22, for this USC defense in 2023 with Caleb Williams, the Heisman Trophy winner, keep it simple. Give up the 10-yard short pass underneath, get off the damn field, give the ball back to Caleb Williams. Like, we do not need to reinvent the wheel, all right? So, why would you be complicated with your scheme starting off? Like, why would you do that? Because now one would think the coaches need to simplify the scheme for the coming weeks, Nevada and Stanford heading into the off week on September 16th. And then maybe you get a little bit more complexity back into the scheme for that Arizona State game on the 23rd, coming off the off week. And that's one of the things I wrote about at Trojans Wire over the weekend in our extensive coverage, is that the Arizona State game now looms as a more significant game after this week 1, because that game is coming off the off week. That's going to be a game in which you're going to need to see real progress in terms of players coming along in their learning curve, and Alex Grinch finding the marriage of simplicity, but also some wrinkles and some new looks so that guys are comfortable in an established role, but they are building a knowledge base. And those 2 weeks between the Stanford game on September 9 and the Arizona State game on September 23rd, what the defensive coaches do in that 2-week window with a week off, how developed are people going to be on defense in their progressions by that Arizona State game, that now becomes more, I think, of a point of emphasis. Where are players going to be after that first off week, which is kind of a little bit of a break and a chance to kind of catch your breath after these first 3 games in that mini season we talked about last week, Mark. The first 3 games are this mini season, and then you have the 9-game main season. And so this game and this spotty defensive performance against San Jose State really puts more emphasis on how USC is going to look against Arizona State. That's going to be the ramp up toward Notre Dame. And so there needs to be a lot of progress by Arizona State. Nevada, Stanford, it's probably going to be a mess, folks. You might not want to hear that. It's probably going to be a mess. Now, Nevada, really bad team, so that might not show up. But the Stanford game could be a real slop fest. I'm not going to put too much weight on what happens against Stanford, provided that it's a win, and it's not going down to the final 5 minutes. But really, I think Arizona State now becomes a really big game to circle, because we will need to see, after 2 weeks of coaching on the practice field, where will USC's defense be by then? All right. But now back to the bigger picture. So why was the scheme complicated in week 1? Why not make it simple in week 1 and just steadily build, steadily add pieces, steadily add components, and you start just with the basics. And that goes to the second point, in terms of why was it complicated in week 1? Now you're probably going to have to step back, which kind of feels like a waste of time, precious time for USC. But the second point, which is connected to the first point, is you're not Georgia, all right? If this was a Georgia defense or another defense which has a reputation for being great, if you have proven players at every position the way Kirby Smart does or the way Nick Saban does at Alabama, then you can go into your first game and have a complicated scheme, okay? If that's what you hang your hat on as a program, as a team, then yes, that would make all the sense in the world. But you're not that. That's not who you are right now. It's who you want to be, okay? But it's not who you are right now. And that's part of coaching, right? Having the humility to know what you are, not what you hope to be, but what you are, and coaching around the reality, not the potential, the reality. And so Alex Grinch, he's not Bill Arnsparger. He's not Vince Lombardi. He's not Tom Landry, one of the great defensive minds in football history. He's not Buddy Ryan. He's Alex Grinch. You have not earned the street cred in the profession to be, this mad scientist tossing out all these schemes. No, you have to work from the ground up. You need to get the basics done first. What was the last game before this San Jose State game? It was that Cotton Bowl disaster in which you couldn't hold a 15-point lead in the final 4.5 minutes. You had the ball for 39. Tulane scored 46 points in 21 minutes and just absolutely ran the ball down your throat and made you look amateurish. You don't have the luxury of doing complicated schemes. You need to do fundamentally sound football, tackling, hitting, the basics. You do not have time to be Mr. Fancy Pants. So that's what I don't get. You're not Georgia. You're not Kirby Smart. Know who you are. 3rd and 22. Just have 9 million center fielders back. Give up the 10-yard dump off. Don't try to get fancy. All right. And it blows my mind that Alex Grinch tried to be fancy like this. And then we have to make the other connection to all of this. Lincoln Riley has stayed loyal to Alex Grinch. And it certainly seems that Lincoln Riley is letting Alex Grinch do things Alex Grinch's way. There has to be a point where Lincoln Riley says, hey, Alex, I'm the leader of this program. I'm your boss. I'm paying your salary. I'm hiring you. I kept you on board when everyone else thought you should be fired. Can you do your job a little bit better? Can you be a little bit smarter? Can we stop this idiocy and these exotic blitzes on 3rd and 22? I just want the ball back for Caleb Williams, please. Thank you. So when does Lincoln Riley step in and say, yo, Alex, get a clue? This is not about trying to write the perfect symphony. This is just get off the damn field on third down and give the ball to my Heisman quarterback, which I know how to coach. So Lincoln Riley, he has responsibility for this. And part of being a head coach is coaching your coaches, coaching your assistants, making sure you get the right plan, the right approach, quality control, everything flowing together, complementary football, that the defense sets up the offense, make sure the offense gets as much possessions as possible, especially now that we have running clock on first downs, which is shaving, several plays off a game. The statistics said, that they were 68 to 63, so they 5 fewer plays per game. It's that much more important to get the ball to Caleb Williams so that he can cook, he can do what he needs to do. So when does Lincoln Riley step into that defensive room and say, Alex Grinch, I'm trying to give you as much freedom as I realistically can, but come on now, work with me. This isn't just your show. We're part of a team here. Your decisions have to serve the larger interests of the team. So short review. You're not Georgia. Alex Grinch is not Kirby Smart or Arnsparger or Buddy Ryan. And you need to build up basics based on the Cotton Bowl. You're not in a position to just start from complexity. You need to start with simplicity and grow your defense and your character and your identity. You need to coach to reality, not potential. Coach with reality. Always stay connected to reality. And then Lincoln Riley has ultimate responsibility for how Alex Grinch goes about his business. That is the opening statement from San Jose State.
We want to first echo the comment on the screen here. Tight end delay letting us know Matt wrote some great articles for Trojans Wire that are a must read this weekend. So go back, Trojans Wire, and join Matt and his fine work right there. It takes me back to elementary school and on even into high school, where what happened, because we're at that point of the year, Matt, where the kids are going back to school right now. What typically happens? You go back, and regardless of the subject, it's a review of last year to make sure everyone's caught up and brought back to the base, the foundation, and and then we build throughout the year. We build on any topic, mathematics being probably the best example. You build on those core concepts and then become more and more complicated as the students show the aptitude to build upon that base knowledge.
Absolutely. And I can allow for the idea that, okay, they wanted to make it more complicated in week one just to see things on film. And I mean, that narrowly makes sense. Like, let's get a lot of stuff on film, and then you can then accelerate the teaching process. I mean, I get that. It makes sense. But this runs into the point that, if this was an elite defensive coordinator in charge of the whole operation, you, Mark, and everyone, every USC fan watching this program here at the Voice of College Football would say, okay, this is a proven elite defensive coordinator. He has everything under control. We can trust this. We can't trust Alex Grinch. And just to be clear, I'm not saying he's a bad coach, but he's not a proven coach. All right. That doesn't mean he's bad, because Lincoln Riley has had pretty terrible personnel for Alex Grinch to take care of at Oklahoma and now at USC. So it's not as though Alex Grinch has had the elite high-end dudes and he's failed to make something of them. All right. So let's be clear about that. But it remains that Alex Grinch is not one of your elite defensive coordinators. He's no Phil Parker from Iowa. He's no Brent Venables. He's not on par with the great defensive minds in college football or any level of football. So he has not earned that benefit of the doubt. And so as much as I would like to think that, the coaching staff has this roadmap of, yes, let's be more complicated in game one knowing mistakes are going to be made, and then we're going to simplify in week 2. And that was the plan all along. Maybe that's it. And there is a certain degree of logic to it. Again, with that long runway toward Notre Dame on October 14th, which is over a month away. Okay, I get it. But you don't have the elite defensive coordinator running the show. And that's where that trust is absent. And like when if you have someone is the best in the room, the best in the country, like quarterbacks know Lincoln Riley is the best quarterback teacher in college football. So like if you're a quarterback, if you're a skill position player and you're being taught by Lincoln Riley, but based on everything you've seen over the past 7-8 years at Oklahoma and USC, you're being coached by the best. Like it's like an NBA player being coached by Eric Spoelstra, Greg Popovich, Phil Jackson, Larry Brown. Like you're being coached by one of the big dogs when he's there in the room. And that creates a certain level of respect that you can't replicate with just anyone else. Like that person coaching you is special. Well, that doesn't exist with Alex Grinch, right? It doesn't exist the way it does with a Phil Parker or another, rock star defensive coordinator in college football. So that influences, at least for me, how I evaluate this larger approach. I love the personnel decisions in terms of getting freshmen some snaps, getting these young guys some reps, and being willing to say, you know what, it doesn't have to look perfect in week 1. We don't need to cover the spread. Spread was 30.5. USC wins by 28. That's not important. And it's also why you should have taken the over. But that's not your obligation as a coach. You're not supposed to win money for the people who bet on your team.
What was the point total in this game? What was the?
It was 66. Projected? It was 66. So that was zoomed way over the total. Yeah. Yep. Should have taken the over, folks. So, you're supposed to be developing players and you are supposed to be thinking of the long game. And so in terms of that specific matter of juggling the lineups, juggling the rosters, I thought the coaching staff was great. And that's a very encouraging thing that like they get it. They get the need to play lots of guys in these early games when they're not going to lose so that they're fresh for the big games in mid-October and into November. So that's very encouraging. Like they get that. So I'm sold that they see that part of the big picture. But in terms of the defensive player development, in terms of making sure that guys are tackling, they're hitting, they're doing what they're supposed to do, they're playing assignment football. Whew, like how, as a USC fan, you have to be worried about this. Like if Chevin Cordero could run for 28 yards on 3rd and 22, what's Bo Nix going to do? What are the other elite quarterbacks that they're going to see later in the season? What are they going to do? And with the clock running on first down, you get into like South Bend against Sam Hartman, and he's able to convert 8 of 10 third downs. Caleb Williams is not going to see the field. If guys are, running around like headless horsemen on 3rd down and you have all this exotic crap instead of just getting off the field, giving the ball back to Caleb Williams. So like that's a concern. But I mean, it's only game 1. I'm not going to revise my prediction about USC, but it really comes down to that earlier point I made about Lincoln Riley can't just give Alex Grinch carte blanche. He can't. And it seems like he did in week 1. We need to see proof. We need to see some hard evidence that, Lincoln Riley actually has a hand on the steering wheel here, that he's able to, not put Alex Grinch in a really narrow box because, again, you have that long runway towards September 14th. But like just a few things. Like it's not just that 3rd and 22 play. Just before halftime, USC didn't have just a bunch of guys playing center field. You had linebackers chasing around in the middle of the field, and you have a receiver who gets open in a pocket down the sideline. Like that should never, ever happen right before halftime. And that is the kind of thing that happened in the Cotton Bowl. It happened, a lot in the second half of last season. And I know that, you have young guys and you're getting everybody up to speed and all that. And it's the first game of the year, but like that should not happen ever, period. That should be totally unacceptable. at USC. And so when you see these mistakes recur, that shows that Alex Grinch, he's not airtight in terms of putting this stuff to bed and nipping it in the bud. And that is the kind of thing that creates these lingering concerns about the defensive coaching staff, and by a head coach who allows this defensive coaching staff to continue to preside over these unforced errors. It is only game one and there is more time, but when these things keep happening, you lose credibility at a certain point. And so that is also, again, why after 2 weeks of coaching, from the 9th to the 23rd, Stanford to Arizona State, no games in between. That's why that Arizona State game on the 23rd, once again, that becomes another hinge point moment in my mind for this USC season and the overall evolution of this team.
Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire. We do this each and every Monday night, 11 o'clock Eastern, 8 Pacific, where it counts. Folks in the chat enjoying Matt's rant. I do as well. We do every week. Slap Happy wants to know when I'm showing up. Slap Happy, I'm on here like 35 hours a week running my mouth. Like there's plenty of time for me. I run my mouth on 15 different channels every day, all day. This is Matt's hour, and Matt's the guy that knows USC football. So I talk when I need to talk. So I'm going to extend what you pretty much did on the final play, basically what was the final play of the first half, the final touchdown that made it a 21-14 game. Didn't necessarily make it interesting like anybody thought, okay, this is going to be, a down to the wire game, but at the same time may have somewhat altered had USC not tacked on immediately at the beginning of the third quarter what the personnel moves could have been. When you have those breakdowns on defense, to put it another way, you're possibly altering the approach that you wanted to have with personnel, with playing all those freshmen, with playing waves of players. The longer the game stays close, then, those are some considerations to be made. I'm going to flip it around, Matt, and point out a few things that to play devil's advocate to possibly defend the USC defense. And one would be a point that you've already made, but I want to make sure that it's not glossed over by the audience, and it's underlined here, that let's say they threw out 5 complicated concepts, whether those were blitz packages or coverage packages, and they wanted to see, okay, who handled what well, who knew their assignments, who could handle this. Okay, everybody handled it but one guy. He blew it. It mattered or it didn't matter because they missed it or whatever. But okay, if we get him on board, we're good. Or they pulled it off, we got it. Or this was a disaster. We had 3 guys out of position. They didn't know. Okay, let's come back to this later in the season, maybe. So at least they could give that a look, like you mentioned. I just want to make sure with the viewers that they understood that point, because I thought that was a really good point in defense of playing a little bit more of an exotic scheme and trying some things. 5 for 14 on 3rd and 4th downs, Matt, for the San Jose State offense. One that's quarterbacked by Chevin Cordero, who's played a lot of football. Not a great quarterback. Certainly USC is going to face 8 or 9 or 10 better quarterbacks, but he's a really capable player, knows what he's doing. And they did get off the field most of the time. So I will say that. 7.3 yards per carry for the San Jose State rushing attack. Now, a lot of that came late. I don't know what those rushing figures were when it was still a competitive game, but I know that they weren't nearly what they ballooned to be at 7.3 yards per carry. So I don't know if you had any responses to those. I don't know if you were with us to hear those couple points.
Heard all of you. I don't know what's going on with my internet connection tonight. My internet connection's, I guess, angry at me, or maybe it's angry at Alex Grinch. I think the main thing about the rushing yards is that, Chevin Cordero, mobile quarterback, and USC, struggling with a shifty, agile quarterback, and that just brings back the point. What happens when you go up against Bo Nix? What happens when you go up against Cam Rising? What happens when you go up against Sam Hartman? That's really the main thing about what Chevin Cordero did and the big plays that San Jose State was able to make. Now, about your earlier point about seeing where people fit at positions, like two instructive examples. Christian Roland Wallace, they had him on the edge, but they also had him near the tackle box. Like, they had him playing in a lot of different spots on the field. They also used Anthony Lucas as another representative example. They played him in different spots, like he was covering a running back at one point. And of course, we remember last year that Alex Grinch had Corey Foreman in pass coverage, and he makes the game-saving interception against UCLA. So Grinch does like to move players around a lot. And so, and you're going to have film. Those players are going to be able to see themselves in different spots on the field and in different roles on film. And that can certainly help the educational process. That can certainly help the teaching and development process. So that is a point for Alex Grinch and the coaching staff, that, okay, you're getting lots of evaluations. You're getting a sense of this roster, and you do need to get a sense of this roster in terms of who fits what and where. Now, I would make the point, and Will ND, I'm going to get to the O-line in a bit, but this is mostly Alex Grinch and the defense. So we'll get to the O-line later for sure. My thought is that, if you're going to play players in different roles, different spots on the field, my thought process would be, going into the season, looking at the schedule and everything, you play one role against San Jose State, then we'll give you a different role against Nevada in week 2, because San Jose State is a tougher opponent than Nevada. San Jose State picked 5th in the Mountain West preseason poll. Nevada picked 11th. Like, Nevada is supposed to be significantly, noticeably worse than San Jose State. So why not just give everyone one role one week and then another role the other week, instead of switching positions within games? Why not develop a little continuity in one role after we've coached you up in practice for that week? And then next week, we're going to coach you through the week for another role, and we'll see how you do in that role on the field. That, to me, I mean, maybe people will disagree, but to me, that seems like a better way to mix and match roles and responsibilities, get a different feel. That just seems like the more natural way to mix things up, get film evaluations of players in different positions at different spots on the field, doing it all in the same game, and doing it all in the first game. Like, that would create the cluttered, uneven kind of performance that we have. And I know that you're sacrificing the perfect outcome in the service of long-term player development. And again, I think that makes sense. That larger decision by the coaches to experiment, that makes sense. But I think there's a way to experiment and yet still get more consistency and continuity. So it's going to be interesting to see against Nevada, how much our players put in different positions on the field, or do we begin to see a little bit more streamlining? My thought process for this Nevada game, in light of the San Jose State game, is, what? This is a game where you probably could continue to be wildly experimental. Like, if you were going to bother to be experimental to a certain degree in the first game, all right, you can do it in the second game, because Nevada is not going to be a tougher challenge than San Jose State. I mean, I would have started simpler at the very beginning against San Jose State, but like, if you want to take what you did in week 1 or week 0, game 1, and carry it over to week 2, that's okay, because Nevada is not going to provide a significant challenge. And so if you want to just throw players all over the chessboard, fine. But when you get into Stanford in that third game on September 9th, you're definitely going to need to begin to see some consolidation for sure. So Nevada, if you want to just, play it similarly to San Jose State, I can go with that. But for the Stanford game, leading into the off week, you need to begin to focus on clarifying roles and clarifying responsibilities, so that you begin that process of knowing where each player plays best, how the 11-man unit fits together the best, and then getting that consistency of performance, building through those Arizona State, Colorado, Arizona games, so that when you get to South Bend, you know what you have, you know who you are, and you know everyone is on the same page.